Well, I grew up in the Lincoln Park neighborhood on Will Street, right next door to Erlanger Hospital. Matter of fact, we used to joke about that our mother would have her children and then kind of come out the back door into her house. I taught at Howard for about 5 years, and then Commissioner John P. Franklin influenced me to come work for him at Alton Park Junior High in a dual job, which was with the South Area Neighborhood Service Center. The next year after I did that, Erlanger Health System recruited me, along with the Community Action Agency, recruited me to be the second director following Leroy Keith as the director of the South Area Neighborhood Service Center. That's where I met a guy named Leonard Fant, associate administrator at Erlanger Hospital. And that's where I learned that there was an organization called the National Association of Community Health Centers, which I immediately associated myself with. And there I became director. I became the president of the National Association of Community Health Centers. Well, shortly after that, Erlanger Hospital developed some racial issues. And there were some African American board members at that point in time who approached me and at the direction of, I guess, Leonard Fant, to see if I would be interested in coming to work at Erlanger Hospital as a manager. Initially, I turned that down because I had just graduated from the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor with a degree in healthcare administration, public health oriented. And I wanted to stay in the community health center movement as long as I could, okay? I was the first black guy on the block. Okay, we had a couple of black board members, but there was nobody at the operational level. So I went into that circumstance, being the first African American in that environment, and I wasn't immediately, applauded. I wish I could tell you what Leonard Fant's boss said to him when he hired me and brought me to Erlanger, but that would serve no good purpose in this interview. My thing, I used to kind of have a little motto that kind of went like this. Let me show you who I am.
Right.
Okay. Let me show you what I can do. Okay. And as a result of that, that was my whole work, with the African American community, as well as with the majority Caucasian community, was to show them what I could do. And as a result of that, I believe I became a lot more acceptable. People came to respect me, I think, for, first of all, my down-to-earthness and my sincerity. And I always tried to work to the advantage, okay, of those who were at the least lowest economic level and the least racial, I guess, attainment level, okay, to bring more people into the system. When I first went over there, there was a walkout that I mentioned. Right. People were seeking higher wages, but they was also seeking better jobs, at the hospital. And so I looked at my role as trying to find a way to have upward mobility, okay, for them. Now, the doctors didn't really think that I had earned the job, okay, when I first got there. So I had to show them who I was, okay. And I made sure that at Erlanger Hospital that African Americans got a portion of the jobs, low wage jobs, high wage jobs, middle wage jobs. I also was involved in recruiting in to hospital other African Americans at the very highest levels.
Right.
Okay. And then, that I always thought my job was to not just eat from the table, was to bring others to the party.
Right.
Okay. So I think people saw that, and the doctors used to look at me and say, well, and even some board members used to say, well, you just hire black folk. I said, no, I hire competent black folk. I never hired a person that wasn't smarter than me, first of all. And I never hired a person that wasn't smarter than all the others I was interviewing.
That's the way it had to be.
Okay, and that's the way it had to be. You see, I couldn't have no judgment problems about, you just do it that way because you're black. I hired as many white administrators as I did black administrators at the highest level, in the hospital. Okay, and then working with the board members at Erlanger was another challenge. Getting them to understand that, I didn't just come in the hospital being recruited from the street. I went back to school and got my professional medical care, education, administration, and business management. Okay, then I came to the table. So I think they knew that I was qualified. That that wasn't the issue. The issue was the color of the skin. Okay, and so I knew that I was going to always have that as a challenge. Working in a healthcare business was dominantly white.
Right.
We had a few doctors and a few dentists. Another part of the thing that I gained doctor support is when I started recruiting African American doctors and white doctors to work in the community health centers. I was involved with finding assistants for all of these black doctors who was coming into the community, okay, giving them access to the same resources, okay, that the majority community had access to. I just couldn't fathom why you could start a practice for whites and you couldn't help start a practice for blacks.
Right.
And I used to always say, but don't black folk deserve black doctors? I knew what I was doing. You follow me? I kind of had two dreams as a little boy, and I shared that with my first and second grade teacher. One of them was trying to get me to write better, and I told the teacher, I say, I don't think I'm gonna ever need to know how to write. I say because I'm gonna be a boss of somebody. Okay, so that didn't sit too kindly with her, but that statement meant that I was reaching for higher heights, and that I was going to have people working with me to help me carry out those kind of clerical tasks. That's what I was looking at that time. I think it must have been my second or third grade teacher that I told him, you had to ask the question, I said, what do you want to be? I said, I want to be the mayor of the city of Chattanooga. Okay, so I set that course all the way through my education career and my job career to get to the point where I would have a broad enough base in the Chattanooga community to run for mayor. And not just run as a black candidate, but to try to run as the best qualified candidate for the job, okay? And that all of those experiences that we just went across prepared me uniquely to run for that job. Well, it didn't prepare me to run against Bob Corker, okay? At that time, that was just running against too much money, okay? And it was kind of like the wrong time. And maybe if I should have ran for mayor when Mayor Kelly probably came out, okay, when he passed on. Maybe I should have been running in that era, okay? I certainly think that all those jobs, the neighborhood-based jobs at the community health center, being a school teacher at Howard High School, okay, being involved with the breadth of the medical community. And I didn't say much about my civil rights action. I always, through all of that, okay, stayed engaged with the African American community's leadership. As a matter of fact, they protested, okay, and marched when I didn't get the job as CEO on one of the occasions.
Yes, certainly did. Okay,
and I remember right after the meeting, they had a meeting down on Garfield Avenue there, right behind Old Tucker Baptist Church, and I went to that meeting. Okay, and I think people were surprised, that I came to that meeting. Well, I did things like one day I was sitting in my office and they were marching up 3rd Street on the way to City Hall. And I was in a meeting. I said, y'all got somewhere I got to go. I went outside and got in the line and marched down to City Hall and stood on the steps at City Hall. So that whole exposure got me in a position where I could run for mayor. Now I lost by a slim margin to Bob Corker. And that was okay with me because I said as a child, I'm going to pursue that. And I pursued it until I couldn't obtain it. And then somebody asked me one day, would you do it again? And the answer was no. I always kind of knew, so I was brought up in the church. My mom and dad, back in my day, you went to church with your mom and your daddy. And most time you was in church all day.
All day.
Okay, so I was brought up in the church. I accepted Christ as my personal savior when I was about, I'd say 9, 10 years old.
Most of us.
Okay, all right. But that didn't. But all the way through my career, I always had a feeling that I had another calling. And I couldn't accept that calling because I was involved with self-attainment, self-achievement. And I didn't see, really I couldn't see what God was doing with my life and what he might be leading me to out over time. But I didn't think I was really being called at that point, okay? I think my calling came one Sunday. I'm sitting there in church, and I'm looking around at myself, and the doors of the church is open, and something said now. Okay, and so I accepted the call. Okay, and then I said, not only have I accepted the call, I have to prepare myself for the call. So when I finally came to my senses that Sunday morning, I said, my role is to try to find a way to serve people in a spiritual way.
Talk a little bit about why you felt the need to be involved in the
Okay.
Bessie Smith and the Chattanooga African American Cultural Center.
Well, first of all, I think it's one of the greatest ideas that came along at that time. I think to try to capture the African American history and preserve it for the presentation for the community and for our children was the right thing to do. Okay, but I was kind of a history buff anyway, coming out of college, undergraduate school at Dillard University, and so I had just this natural inclination to want to know more and more about the African American experience in America. But I had lived an experience and a story that was worth telling, not my personal story, but the stories of the men and women, okay, and the organizations and the pressure groups and I guess the protest groups, and to try to find a way to preserve that history so that our children, okay, would know what price was paid and who paid the price to kind of get them to where they are now. See, you don't know where you're going. You can't get to where you're going until you know where you came from. Okay, and the next step that I envisioned really was to have a dynamic presence on this lot that would be kind of like a gathering place for all people in the community, and that we just wouldn't serve African Americans, but we would serve all Americans who wanted to find out about who were the African American people, okay, who lived here. To look back one day and say, well, who was Samuel L. Jackson? You find where did he go? Where did Reverend Caldwell? Where did John P. Franklin? Where did all these people? What did they do, Mr. Mapp? You follow me? They paid tremendous. Reverend Wright, okay, Johnny Holloway, okay, Sherman Matthews. I saw one of the greatest cultural arts center I'd ever seen. And they feature black plays, they feature black comedy, they feature black music, all this. And guess who supports it? The whole city of Cleveland. The politicians, the neighborhoods, the fraternities, the sororities, everybody is supporting it. So the challenge would be for us to raise money in this community to take this to another level on this site.
What would your words of wisdom be to our children that will come through and see you talking about your life? What would you say to them to help them along life's way?
Yeah. I would say that look at yourself as a creation of God. Know that you have a God within you because he put the breath of life into you through your mom and through your dad. He made you to be kings and queens. And he made you to be powerful human beings. He equipped you with everything you need to be successful. I met 3 African American men and one African American woman who were head of the research development operations for NASA. And they had brought into there a whole lot of other young people who was working. Now a young African American woman is the top dog. Okay? This story hadn't been told. Okay? But it kind of shows you, if you want to be an astronaut, got African American astronauts. You want to be an African American senator? We got African American senators. If you want to be a high quality African American dad, we got that. Moms, we got that. Okay? And the point that I make it is, you could be anything that you want to be, but you have to prepare yourself to get to these levels. Nobody is going to give you anything. You aren't going to be, if you're African American, you're not going to be born with a silver spoon in your mouth. It's just not going to happen, okay? You're going to have to earn everything that you get, okay? So I would just encourage the young people get your education, okay, grow families, okay, and then you assure like my mom and dad, and like my wife's mom and dad, that the family unit survives. And I think you'll be okay. So you can be anything that you want to be, as long as you want to be something.